May I offer my greeting. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in the Middle East. Good evening to our friends in Thailand, India, Singapore, Indonesia, and Australia. Good to see you. I hope you're well. I have some questions. Dear Ajahn, how can I be forgiven for having very unwholesome thoughts of anger towards my parent? I realize now that it arose from deep delusion and feel very guilty. Thank you. So, in how we understand Buddhist morality, virtue, the way we cultivate virtue in Buddhism, Buddhist practice, is we acknowledge fault, we ask forgiveness, and we set the intention to try not to do it again. So if the parent is still alive, we would say sorry and and then acknowledge I was deluded, and I realize these thoughts or these words, these actions were unwholesome, unskillful. I'm sorry if I hurt you. Please forgive me. So that's very valuable practice. And whether people forgive us or not, that's actually that's their choice. But we, from our side, acknowledge fault. I think it's very important to have compassion for oneself because, as this person's saying, I realize now the mind was affected by delusion. So the thing about delusion is that it deludes. And in the moment, with a deluded mind, this person didn't know that it was unskillful. So there's various things that we can feel. Self-righteousness. One of the dangers of that emotion, that mind state, self-righteousness, is the feeling of being right. Deludes the mind. And then afterwards it's like, actually, Luang Por Chah sometimes use the phrase, right but not correct. It's like, and then I think I'll just bring it up because I think it's related. I've just begun to write an autobiography in English. And one of the reasons I'm doing that now in my 50s is because I think you can look back on your life with more wisdom, more perspective, more forgiveness, and more grace. And it's like something about having a look back on one's life with the perspective of a middle-aged man with 30 years experience as an adult, and having had wise teachers, you can see your experiences with a different perspective. And one of the reasons I want to write a biography, besides the fact that several people complained that I'd written one in Thai and didn't write one in English, and they would like to read one in English. So that is a factor. But another factor is as an exercise in appreciation. When I realize the many blessings that are in my life, it's nice to acknowledge various people, and also the lessons that we learn in life. It's like, because everybody has suffering, what do we do with our suffering? That's a teaching, that's a lesson. So I'd be willing to share that with people, but I'm in no hurry. Also, just probably take 10 years to write my and but how does that relate to the question? So when we're young, we make mistakes. We don't have who made that? I don't know who the famous quote was. Youth is wasted on young people. It's we have so much energy, but we have wild emotions, but we don't have a wise perspective, and we don't have a trained mind. So in that respect, it's inevitable that we make some mistakes. And I think also, like, if you look at the universality of something like that, like being unreasonably angry or excessively angry towards a parent, it's kind of probably like, well, welcome to the human experience. I would say most human beings, except for perhaps the occasional very rare deva that just got reborn with extremely benevolent countenance, most people will, for periods of time in their childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, have unreasonable expectations and excessive reactions of anger towards their parents. So that's part of the human experience, the human beings being somewhere between heaven and hell, and experiencing ghost-like mind states, demonic mind states in moments, deva-like mind states, and even Brahma mind states. When we make our minds peaceful, we're in the middle of the samsaric situation. So we make mistakes under the influence of delusion. So sometimes if we're having some challenges forgiving oneself, one of my very first teachers in Buddhism, I think Australian lady, said, imagine somebody just like you on the other side of the world. You can give them a different color skin if you like. You can make them speak a different language if you like. But imagine they made the same mistake as you and they can't forgive themselves. Spread metta to them and forgive them. Just as a creative exercise, because it helps dissolve a kind of a block. If you've got a block, if you've got a withholding habit, you don't want to give acceptance, forgiveness, withholding to that particular mistake in yourself. So imagine someone else very similar to you in the fact that they got upset with their parent and were unreasonably angry, and now they can't forgive themselves. If it wasn't you, you probably will feel some sympathy for that human experience. And then so you radiate loving kindness to someone in a similar situation, but just in your imagination, and just, yeah, contemplating the pervasiveness of that kind of experience and having compassion. So if you can have compassion, another thing you can do is like breathing in, may I be free from suffering. That's a particular type of suffering, feeling like you can't forgive yourself. So you breathing in, may I be free from suffering. And breathing out, may all of the hundreds of millions of human beings on the planet who feel that they can't forgive themselves for mistakes that they made, may they be free from suffering. It's just a way of expanding it and making it like this is the human situations. Many, many people have this mind state. And you make that wish for everybody, like everybody who's got this stuck, kind of closed-hearted, painful, guilty experience. May I be free of the suffering of guilt. May all beings experiencing this emotion be free from this emotion. May I learn to forgive myself for things I did under the power of delusion. May all beings learn to forgive themselves for things they did under the power of delusion. And you make it less personal, then somehow it becomes possible to have a more expansive attitude towards, the vulnerability and fallibility of the human beings, the situation that we have. If the parent has passed away already, so and you're in a situation where you can't say sorry and give a few gifts, like if the person, okay, firstly, if the parent is still alive, then make really beautiful, loving gestures. It's like I ask my students sometimes to help me send flowers to my mum on her birthday and help arrange things for her sometimes if she needs some help. And some of my students sometimes call her on her birthday. Just when I visit her, I haven't been for a while, but when I visit her, some students have made funds available so that I could take my mum out to lunch so she doesn't have to cook during that period of time. And done that many times. Take my mum for a nice lunch where she's waited on. She gets to eat what she wants to. She doesn't have to wash the dishes. And those kind of things. You can do gestures now that to make up for the harsher times. But if the parent has passed away, then you can do meritorious deeds in their name and dedicate the merit to them. And if we do this frequently, it really does change the perception. Like, okay, I made some mistakes, and then in recognizing that, I cultivated all this virtue, did all this generosity in the name of my dear parent. And if you're consistent with it and you do it repeatedly for a period of time, when you think of your mum or your dad, I think it heals the perceptions, because you've got these other perceptions, these kind and generous things you did in their name when you honored them. So there are these things that we can do. remember when I was a young adult, I would be awful if I was writing an autobiographical chapter in my early 20s, how angry I was at my parents. It's something in Western psychology that we blame our parents for a lot of our shortcomings. And it's true that we are socialized largely by them, and we do develop some of their bad habits. But when you get a bit older and you realize you make mistakes, and you're not perfect, your parents made mistakes, your parents aren't perfect, there's some kind of humbling in getting older when you acknowledge that you're a fallible human being too. And with my particular parents, one of the nice things about getting older and being able to look with more equanimity or more perspective is that recognizing that although there were some challenging phenomenon, some painful experiences, they actually did better towards their children to what they had had in terms of their mentoring and parenting. And then you actually have to give some credit, don't you? It's like, well, actually, they made some mistakes, but they did better than their own teachers. So, kudos. And it's a long learning process that we're involved in. So good luck in your healing and your forgiveness, and doing good deeds towards and in the name of your parents. So, dear Ajahn, may I know if one can attain enlightenment or attain to stream entry while doing simple daily chores? It does not always need to be in a meditative state for one to become enlightened, right? I want to know if one way out is for one to be very mindful with all of the small tasks one is doing. Thank you. Technically, it's possible for the mind, for the path factors in the mind to converge in a way that causes insight. There are some verses in the Theravada that come to mind, where one of the bhikkhunis was throwing out some water on the ground, and she saw the way the water kind of dissolved into the dirt and disappeared, and her mind was liberated through seeing the impermanence. But normally you would assume that as a bhikkhuni, she's been doing a lot of meditation. And the bhikkhuni in the time of the Buddha, whose verses on enlightenment made it into a text, one would assume that she'd been doing quite a bit of practice, and that's what made her have enough mindfulness and stable enough upajjhara samadhi to have that insight while engaged in daily activities. So the mindfulness in daily activities supports the formal meditation, for sure. If you can be mindful, very mindful in all of your activities, when you come to sit, it doesn't take as long for the mind to settle. So it has that value. And then when you do your formal meditation, then when you set the determination to bring that collected energy into your daily tasks, they then support one another. But you shouldn't really go without either of them. You have to do your formal meditation, set the intention to carry that mindfulness in all activities. And then from having done that, your mind will come together more quickly. I know that the person who's asking this question has several young children, and she has a lot of tasks and less time for formal meditation, but we do have to do the formal meditation. Students of Ajahn Acho know that's what Ajahn Acho is going to say. And we do more and more as we age. And yeah. From my understanding of my own teacher, Thanajan Anand's insights, the big insights were in the formal sitting posture. So, and I believe with Liam, my preceptor, I believe it was while he was doing walking meditation. So it tends to be, I would assume more often than not, that it's in the formal, at a time when one is deliberately meditating. So. Dear Ajahn, may I know how one can reduce their bad karma and obstructions? I do put forth effort and determination into performing meritorious deeds. There are some occasions where I will tune into YouTube to listen to some repentance chants or purification chants, hoping this will be of help. However, I am aware that in the Theravada tradition, this doesn't appear to be practiced. Seeking your guidance on this. Thank you. So it is true. I'm aware that in the Mahayana tradition, there is repentance ceremonies, repentance chants, and sometimes repentance retreats where one acknowledges faults. And in the Vajrayana, there is the 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, recitation. And although it's not taught in Theravada, in a Theravada, it's more of an understanding of we have some dark deeds, we have some heavy negative karmas, and they're like dark water in the bucket, in the bottom of the bucket. And how we understand it, how we approach it generally in the Theravada is you just keep pouring clear water in. So the more clear water you pour in, the less power that darkness has. But in Thailand, in terms of anecdotally, from what I experience of having lived in Thailand, there is a recognition that we have harmed beings. Some of those beings have ill will towards us. And there's a recognition that after you make good karma, every time you make good karma, you also dedicate it to beings who you have harmed or who may wish you harm. It's a part of the formal offering that they do when they're offering Sanghadana type people. They will dedicate the merit to their parents, their relatives, alive and departed, and beings who wish them harm. There's a particular phrase called Jalkam Nai Wen, beings that are related to you through ill will, and then to all beings. So after every offering, they're bringing to mind the fact that they have harmed beings, and some of those beings may not be well disposed towards them. And so they're sharing good karma with those beings. Every time they make an offering, they're sharing good karma with the beings and then when the monks are chanting, there will often be people asking, it's like they ask forgiveness as well. So any beings that I've harmed knowingly or unknowingly, under the influence of delusion, I ask for your forgiveness, your forbearance. Please receive these merits. And some of them do, and some of them don't, apparently, from what I've heard. Like I asked Ajahn Anan, who I believe is in his final life, if he still had some beings that wished him harm, and apparently he does. So it's like this is one of the upakilesa I often talk about. The negative qualities that affects minds is grudge. So holding a grudge. If our ability and capacity to hold a grudge is deep enough, and we might even hold a grudge towards an arahant in their final life, if we don't learn how to forgive and contemplate on the law of karma, and also contemplate on the drawbacks of grasping these kilesas and the destinations that they will take us. So in terms of practice in Theravada, when you make offerings, you dedicate merit to beings you may have harmed and ask them to forgive you every now and then. And that is generally believed by Thai people to lessen the obstruction, lighten up the karma. So that's an unexplained, but even for the ones that don't accept the merit and don't rejoice, the act of sharing merit with them is like a protection. It's like if you imagine there's some dark energies that come towards you, when you radiate light towards them, if they don't like light, they will tend to step back. So has a protective influence, which also makes it karma less likely to ripen. So hope that's helpful. Interesting question. Dear Ajahn, how can I move on from my ex? It's been close to 1.5 years, but I still get depressed thinking about her and sad that she has already moved on. You do know that I'm a celibate monk, right? It's been 30 years since I had a romantic relationship. Lay people like to ask monks questions about their husbands and wives and their children, but we don't have husbands or wives or children. I will try to say something helpful. How can I move on from my ex? I feel sad that she's moved on. Oh. Okay. So as I just said, I'm a monk. So What is a monk? Monk is someone who's committed to realizing liberation of mind through seeing according to the truth, deeper truth. So I have to be truthful. Not everybody likes truth. Something you have to be careful with the truth, how much truth you can say with to which person. But I didn't become a monk to be popular. I didn't get where I am today from being liked. So I'm going to give you the tough love. Are you ready for the tough love? Some people are shaking their heads. Some people are nodding their heads. Okay. The problem is you loved her too much when you fell in love with her. That's the problem. The problem is in the past. Now, this is understandable. I'm not saying loving someone is wrong, but we are conditioned and socialized to grow up believing that when you fall in love, you will be happy, and that romantic love is happiness. It's in so many movies, it's in so much popular culture. So we're like primed as young children and teenagers with all the movies that if you fall in love and you're really in love, that's happiness. Guess what? It's not. It might compose some happiness in some people's lives for a certain amount of time, but it's not happiness with a capital H. And so what happens though is because we have faith that it is, we meet someone and we fall in love, and you may be with them for a period of time, you allow yourself to love them so much. And this is really dangerous because when you do that, you've lost your center. And, you know, one should, a bit of relationship advice from Ajahn, so what do I know? But anyway, I'll try. It's, I think if you have a healthy sense of self-care, good boundaries, you love yourself and you love your life, and then you meet someone else similar and you can have some kind of complementary, supplementary relationship, good. But if you feel that you're not okay without someone else, something's already wrong. And so we need to work on that. Like one needs to have, I don't need to work on that. You need to work on that. One needs to have healthy, we all need to work on having healthy self-care and having loving kindness for oneself as the foundation for being able to have loving kindness towards others. That's true for everybody. And so yeah, the problem is that when that you got lost in that love too much, you lost yourself in that love too much, and you weren't aware that it could change. It's like when you go into this with the belief that this is my source of happiness, and there's an assumption, because this is the way delusion works, there's an assumption that it will last. And so it's part of Buddha's practice, isn't it, to remind ourselves this too will change, this too will change. And as we get older, we're able to do that more effectively. But for our first love, it's hard. So of course, as a monk, if you feel sad, your girlfriend left you, you could become a monk or a nun. That would be my first advice. If that's not an option, and you could train yourself to love all beings impartially and equally. Fill the entire universe with love instead of try to make one poor person receive it all. And if that's not an option, then the deep loving acceptance of your own conditioned state and cultivation of loving kindness, to which you cultivate it in a disciplined way to include people whom it's easy to have loving kindness towards, neutral beings, difficult beings, and all beings, then I think you would be an attractive person, and probably somebody will find that attractive eventually. And when you have your own healthy self-esteem, healthy self-care, and radiant, the benefits of loving kindness, a radiant complexion, loved by devas and humans. So I would say work on the metta practice, and someone else may come along. Yeah, compassion. It's like one doesn't try not, you don't, if that is the situation, one tries not to judge it too harshly, that one has to just accept this is how I feel. And then so there's I teach loving kindness as having several stages. The first is the loving acceptance. So you lovingly accept that feeling. That's how I feel. It's like this, as Ajahn Sumedho often says. It's like this. That's where we start. And then once you've embraced that feeling with some acceptance and some kindness, and again, compassion for the pervasiveness and commonness of this experience, how many other people in the world feel brokenhearted and look back for the rest of their life on the one that left them that they thought was the one, how painful that is. So have compassion for the phenomenon, and then fill your own heart, because the thing is, we have the ability to generate and radiate enough loving kindness for all of our own needs. We really do. And we have to be disciplined about that for that to become reality. And then if you are really diligent, if love is something that you decide that you're really into, then as I said, you develop impartial, objective, loving kindness for all beings everywhere, filling space. What a wonderful way to respond to feeling dumped, you know. I choose to respond to feeling dumped by loving everybody. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. And, if we do this daily in a really genuinely sincere way, probably will miss her a little bit less. So I hope that's helpful. Forgive me if I said anything offensive. I don't mean to be offensive.